I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is a woman named Taylor Schabusiness. Her crime is something you might expect in a horror movie, a psychosexual attack from a most dangerous of predators. It might sound like fiction, but this is 100% true. Here's her story. The death of Shad Thyrion was violent, gruesome, and bizarre. It's the type of case that makes you wonder how and why one human could treat another human that way. The more details you learn, the more shocking it all seems. This is the story of Shad and a woman named Taylor Schabusiness. Both are from the same part of Wisconsin in Green Bay. Both were just 24 years old. They were friends and were involved in a sexual relationship. On February 21st, 2022, Shad, Taylor, and her roommate bought some drugs. At one point, Taylor's roommate left, and Shad and Taylor went to his mother's house to the basement. That's where things took a very dark turn. Taylor strangled Shad to death, performed sexual acts on his corpse, and dismembered his body, leaving his head in a bucket in the basement that was later found by his mother. Then her behavior continued in court when she attacked her own attorney. What's the story of Taylor Schabusiness and all this bad behavior? Everything about her is extremely scary. All of her behavior and the looks inside the courtroom as well. Also, after she's taken into custody and interviewed by police, I mean, what she says, how she says it, we see very few cases like this. I want you to take a look.
Well, they found kind of disturbing stuff at the house there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of blood. Basically Shad's head. Yeah.
I'm terrible at explaining things, so let's see here. I didn't want him to die, actually. He's my buddy, but like it happened.
Did you feel a need to try to help him? Stop choking him or get an ambulance? You didn't feel a need to do that?
I don't know why. It happened so fast.
So then after you realized he was no longer, he was dead, his face was purple, he said all the blood's going out of his mouth. What'd you do?
Clean him up a little bit. And then, I just play with him like a little.
You said play with him, what do you mean?
Play with him. Like I put him up over the bed, and then
Was it erect?
it was
Did you,
even
what did you do with his penis?
I put it on.
So all of a sudden, the chain went around his neck. How come? I'm just trying to get it.
He likes it.
All right.
I was gonna walk him like a dog.
Don't forget the backstory here. Her victim, Shad, was a friend of hers, and they had agreed to engage in some sexual conduct, and then all of this happens. So that brings me to my first question in this story, in this case, in this investigation. What fueled this attack? What was it? What drove her to engage in this level of behavior? Got some great experts with us. Clinical and forensic psychologist, researcher, and expert on violent crime, and the author of The New Evil, Dr. Gary Brucato is with us. Also joining us, forensic psychologist, trial expert, witness, and columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Thank you both for being here. Dr. Gary, I'll begin with you. Let's start with the question. What fueled this attack? What is it that gives you the motivation to do what she engaged in?
Well, I think one of the problems people have had looking at this case is that they think that someone really has to go into one category. They have a psychotic disorder, it's their personality, and they're a little sadistic, it's a sexual motivation, drugs, alcohol. I think it's a kind of a combination. My sense is that this is an individual who had a mixture of psychotic symptoms and some kind of aberrant personality, the kind of person who enjoyed sexual behaviors that were very violent and cruel, and then fueled by methamphetamine, sort of indulges in this over-the-top, highly disorganized kind of perversion that involves murder in this instance. And there are offenders in the past that have had that mixture. They're not common, but I would, for example, encourage the audience to read about the case of Albert Fish, who was a psychopathic individual who also had a psychotic disorder and engaged in many similar things, to the point of also putting a head on a can to drain it out, castration, that kind of evisceration. But he was both. And I think that's the best way to think about this person, is that they're a mixture of all of those things.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, I want you to take a listen to more of her police interview here. She's describing more of what she did to Shad.
How did you dismember his body?
Knives.
With what?
Knives.
Knives? Just more than one knife? More sharp?
No. It was alright. Bread knife works good.
Bread knife?
A bread knife works good.
Really?
I had to use what I used. So I got lazy last night, so.
Even the demeanor there, Dr. Carol Lieberman, what are your thoughts here and your take on what's fueling this attack by Taylor Schabusiness?
Well, in addition to whatever diagnosis that she has, and she was diagnosed as PTSD and bipolar, but it could have been other things too, or a combination. But I think the most important thing is to look into her childhood, to look into her, who she was. This is a very unusual presentation. She's essentially admitting that she did this. It's not like she's trying to pretend that she was not guilty. And what's interesting is that in her life, first of all, her mother died when she was around 11 of cirrhosis. And then her father remarried really quickly. And when the woman who he married had children. So essentially, he was not paying any attention to her. He was not able to, to help her go through the grief. And then she went with her paternal grandparents. And then she came back after high school to her father. She missed her father. And soon after that, her father was put in prison for rape. Rape of a 13-year-old girl who presumably was one of his stepchildren. And so he was gone. So she was lost. She lost her mother. She lost her father. There was nobody to take care of her. And so I think, this crime obviously is extremely sexual. It's not that she just killed him, and cut him up. I mean, there was this, she castrated him. She played with him, as she said, sexually after he was dead. There's something the very predominantly sexual about it. So what I think it is that her father possibly sexually abused her. And I think she saw Shad, especially at that moment when she was, on drugs and so on, she saw Shad as her father. In other words, wanting to get back at the man who had raped her, because it was so incredibly brutal. She castrated, not only she put his head in the bucket, she put his penis in the bucket. I won't go into all the gruesome details if you don't want, but I mean, it's clearly it's just very sexual, and that I think needed to be taken into consideration more. And it's sad because they did have an expert witness psychologist who did say that she was not guilty. She should have fit not guilty by reason of insanity, and yet, of course, the state psychologist found her competent, first of all, and then they didn't find that she was not guilty by reason of insanity. And I think they just didn't look deep enough.
You mentioned some of those details. Here's Detective Philip Scanlon describing some of those details.
What other items were in the bucket? There was remains, two different specific types of remains that I observed. Okay. There was a human head. There was genitalia in the bucket.
Let me stop you there. What do you mean genitalia?
What I would recognize as a penis and testicles.
And were they laying underneath the head?
They were visible after the head was removed, yes.
What else did you see?
I observed a black Miracle 3 kitchen blade knife that was removed. Kitchen knife. I observed a yellow pocket knife, I guess, for best description, with a pocket knife with a yellow handle. There was like a head of a razor, like a shaving razor blade, nail, Jolly Rancher, and there was a flesh material that the doctor just described as a flesh material.
Dr. Gary Brucato, is there any significance to the way she dismembered him and what she did with the remains?
Well, in my work at with the forensic team at Boston College, we've examined crimes involving mutilation, which is really, this goes well beyond dismemberment. It's a full-blown mutilation. And we've also examined castration as an offense. And what's interesting is that most of that is done actually defensively by more organized people that are butchering the body to get rid of evidence. But you can see it in people that are very fueled by drugs or extremely psychotic and disorganized, that are just hacking a person to pieces in an outrageous way. But I think that there's a very interesting point raised by Dr. Lieberman, which is that there may be a minimization of the role of abuse. Albert Fish, incidentally, who I mentioned earlier, also had been abused in childhood and developed a fixation on castration, partially as a way of kind of evening the score, I think. We found that in castration crimes, when women commit castration crimes, it is more often than not because they have been abused. And that is then projected onto some male individual who is castrated to level the playing field. So it is interesting to think about that butchering of the body as a way of kind of getting even for feeling turned into an object or destroyed by someone who may have abused you. But of course, it's impossible to say this. I think it's a very interesting speculation that Dr. Lieberman makes based on my experience. But I think we also have to think about the role of psychotic disorder and methamphetamine in the sheer chaotic disorganization that we saw there. It was just completely over the top.
Absolutely. Great points across the board here. Now, the father has never been charged with anything or accused of that, but, you know, it's part of the story, the growing up, everything else. Obviously disturbing behavior. Coming up next, though, is recovery possible for Taylor Schabusiness?
You're going to take the hit someone.
I like that.
You liked it?
Matriarch of the Adelson family gets arrested.
Terrible. Donna Adelson is facing charges of murder, the death of her former son-in-law, Dan Markell.
Prosecutors say a bitter child custody battle was the motive for the murder-for-hire plot.
Now that Donna has turned into a defendant, what's next for the Adelson clan?
Now that the ship is really sinking fast, blood doesn't matter that much.
The Matriarch Mastermind murder trial. Live coverage begins next week, only on Court TV.
You ever love something so much that you kill it? Like, it happens to me. That's the feeling that I have. I love something so much that I kill it. Like, I love it so much, and then I kill it.
Wow. You love something so much, you just have to kill it. That's Taylor Schabusiness being interviewed after she killed someone that I think I don't know if she loved him, but she clearly liked him as a friend of hers, Shad Thyrion, and took his life, mutilated his body. Here she is, though, in the interview, trying to explain her actions to a certain extent. Take a listen.
I didn't mean for all this to happen, and I'm like, I know I up. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what happened.
Well, you know, it's feelings, got a mom and a sister and a dad and family, and it's more of being sorry, you know. You killed them.
You're gonna tell the sister sorry. Didn't mean for that to happen.
You didn't mean to kill them?
I
But you didn't try to help him?
No, I didn't. No, it works both ways. Like I have no idea. Like
You was
you
gonna
gotta
die.
be taught him to change.
Right, you was gonna die, so.
I mean, I didn't, but at the same time, I woke up like, that's bad. I didn't know what to do.
I can't make heads or tails out of what she's saying there. I'm sorry, but I did it on purpose. What could I do? And I'm wondering, though, she did say I didn't mean for it to happen. I'm sorry. So I'm wondering, my next question tonight about Taylor Schabusiness, right? This point moving forward. Is recovery possible for Taylor Schabusiness? Can she somehow get more closer to being normal? I don't know if normal is the right word. I don't know what it is. I need my experts. Still with us, Dr. Gary Brucato and Dr. Carol Lieberman. Dr. Carol Lieberman, what are your thoughts? Can she recover from this and become, yes, I don't even know what the word is that I'm looking for here, but be someone who's more amenable to like complying with the rules of society, even if she's incarcerated?
Well, as a psychiatrist, I need to believe that everybody can become closer to normal, or lose some of their psychotic or very psychiatrically troubling features. But that interview, there was something really interesting about that, in that she was obsessed with Jeffrey Dahmer. And Jeffrey Dahmer, when he killed young men, it was because he wanted to keep he cut them up and eat them and all that, but he wanted to keep them with him, because his father had abandoned him, and he had, that was kind of the point of that. And thinking back about how I was saying earlier, how she was lost, it's like things in her life, the rug kept being pulled out from under her. And so in a sense, perhaps she wanted, just like Jeffrey Dahmer, to I kill somebody, I loved him so much, or when I love something, I kill it. And it's perhaps also because she wants to keep it with her.
And there she is, taking a selfie with Jeffrey Dahmer. Dr. Gary Brucato, I want to show you what happened. And this is after her arrest. She appears in court, she has a lawyer, and then this happens.
Stop it. Stop it.
Obviously, that's after the police interview, but pretty close in time. This is one of the first appearances, if not the first appearance. Dr. Gary Brucato, what are your thoughts about someone like Taylor Schabusiness being able to have some level of recovery to normalcy?
Well, I think it's a little tricky because you'd have to know what exactly the etiology of this was in order to get a sense of prognosis. If you have somebody with a persistent, severe mental illness and they're appropriately medicated and in some kind of treatment, there could be some improvement. If you have a person who is acting that way because they've used serious illicit substances, being off the substance can help. If the person has been abused in childhood or has attachment problems of the type that Dr. Lieberman was describing, and I have to say I was delighted to see that she anticipated precisely the thought I was going to make about Dahmer, that this may have been a kind of an attachment thing that went haywire. That's something that can improve in psychotherapy. The trouble is that it's impossible to say, because she is such a soup of all of these different things at the same time, that it's very difficult to tell what exactly is triggering any particular thing. For example, that explosive behavior you just showed on the screen, I'd have to know what precipitated it. Did she view the person that she was attacking through a particular lens that was distorted? Was she hallucinating? Did she project onto him some feeling from someone else? Was she feeling trapped and self-protective? Was she still showing effects of some biological effects of drugs or mental illness? It's very difficult to tell. So I think that part of the trouble is we need the full picture before we can answer that. But I echo Dr. Lieberman that we must remain hopeful that any of us is capable of improvement with some kind of care.
Dr. Lieberman, I wanted to play for you because you mentioned her father. Her father did speak. Take a listen to what he had to say about his daughter.
Would you agree that your daughter has redeeming qualities to her?
description.
Can you tell me what they are?
I don't know, it's sad for me to sit up here, knowing what happened and stuff, and knowing my daughter the way, she was, and the way she still can be. It's just night and day. She was always a loving, caring person. She liked to have fun, liked to joke around a lot. She's not the monster that, she's being made out to be. That's for sure.
Dr. Lieberman, we have about 45 seconds here. What are your thoughts about Dad and what he had to say about Taylor?
It was all right, but it was really kind of like damning with faint praise, That's the best that he could say about her. But, just one other thing, I think we need to look at her neurologically. It's possible that she had some kind of traumatic brain injury, and that is accounting for these sort of, sudden acts of violence. I don't mean necessarily the killing, the murder, but I mean like how she attacked her attorney in court and so on. It's worth looking into whether there's some kind of a brain injury, particularly the frontal lobe.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, Dr. Gary Brucato, could not do this show without you. Your insight is really incredible, and your experience obviously shows through all of this. Thank you both for helping us through this very, very difficult case. It's a tough one. Taylor Schabusiness is locked up now, but there will be, unfortunately, another Taylor Schabusiness somewhere down the road. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is a man named Joel Guy Jr. He was living a relatively nondescript, unremarkable life, accomplishing very little, but his parents still loved him and supported him. That is until Joel Jr. finally did something that the world noticed, something that can only be described as evil. Here's his story. It was Thanksgiving for Lisa and Joel Guy. They had a big announcement for their family, and they were going to reveal it at dinner. Their adult children all came to Knoxville to be with Mom and Dad, Joel Jr. and his half-sisters. Lisa and Joel told the kids they were retiring, selling the home, and moving. The girls were excited about the move, but Joel Jr. was not. So after Thanksgiving, the girls left, but Joel Jr. stayed. What happened next was beyond shocking. He stabbed his mother 31 times and his father 42 times. He dismembered their dead bodies and began dissolving the remains with acid. In the middle of all this, he left the home to take care of an injury. And after a co-worker asked for a wellness check for Lisa, police went to the house and encountered a crime scene that was as gruesome as they come. The type of scene you just don't forget. This story, Thanksgiving, the family coming together, Mom and Dad saying, listen, we're going to retire, we're going to sell the house, things are going to change, but we're going to enjoy ourselves. And then that happened. Not just brutally murdering them, but dismembering their bodies. I want to show you the image that I don't think anyone is ever going to forget. Anyone that has heard of this story or saw his trial, take a look at this image. That pot on the stove. You lift the lid to that pot, and what you would find and what police found inside was Lisa Guy's head. Joel Jr.'s mother's head in a pot on the stove. That brings me to my first question in this story, in this case, in this investigation. What fueled this attack? His parents took care of him. This was a family. This was Thanksgiving. How do you go from that to what those officers encountered inside of that home. Going to need some help to walk through all this. With us, retired police commander and host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, and psychotherapist and author of The Minds of Mass Killers, Understanding and Interrupting the Pathway to Violence, Siobhan Scott is with us as well. Thank you both for being here. Let's start with that image, Mike, trying to uncover and figure out why he would do that. But the image of someone taking his mother's head and putting it in the pot on the stove.
You know, this is just such a reminder, Vinnie, of what law enforcement officers experience on these horrendous crime scenes as they go in, the sights and the smells. And I'll tell you, I have still memories of tasting the iron and blood in my mouth from some of these crime scenes that I went to. And as the officers went through, they immediately started to discover things that made them uncomfortable. Not only the smells, but then imagine walking along and curiosity is going to get the cat, and he lifts the lid of that pot and discovers Mrs. Guy's head inside of that, along with all of the blood spatter, the damage, and then the tanks of chemical and other things that happened in this case. Absolutely horrendous. And I'll tell you, my feeling and thought go out to those poor officers that had to experience this and then put it into a report and then report on it in a courtroom. And obviously to the family of the guys, just such horror, just a terrible crime scene.
Siobhan, I want you to take a listen to the prosecutor from the trial here describing some of what happened to Mr. and Mrs. Guy.
The killer went to work on their bodies. Joel Sr.'s arms, both of them, were severed at the joint, the shoulder blade. Both of his legs were removed at the hip. His right foot was removed at the ankle. And as you know, his hands, of course, were also removed at the wrist. Lisa had both of her arms removed from her torso at the shoulder. Both of her legs were cut off below the knee. Her right hand was severed from her arm, and the killer cut off her head.
Siobhan, these aren't strangers to Joel Guy Jr. This is his dad, Joel Guy Sr., his mom, the people who brought him into this world, raised him, and were still taking care of him as an adult. What fuels an attack like this?
Yeah, this is the strangest case, which is why we're still trying to get to the bottom of it and figure it out. The murder of one parent is called a parricide, and that's fortunately rare. But the double murder, the double parricide, is even more rare. And most of the time when it happens, it's because the perpetrator is psychotic. They have a severe condition like schizophrenia, bipolar illness. They're having hallucinations and delusions, and they really are out of their mind. There was no evidence presented in this case that Joel was having any chronic severe mental health problems like that. There was no fueled by methamphetamine drug abuse going on. So what in the world would cause a person to be this cruel and this brutal? We didn't get much information from his trial because there was no attempting to say that he was insane or had any kind of mental health problems. So we got no evidence about that. So we're left trying to figure it out. What can we say? He was clearly cruel. He was calculating. He was callous. He clearly did not have an attachment to his parents. He was entitled. He took their credit cards and was spending their money and paying his rent months in advance after the murders. This is not a normal person in any way, but it didn't seem fueled by mental illness per se. It seemed more like a person who has a severe personality disorder. And of course, in that case, we're usually looking at someone who's a psychopath with a few other things blended in, I think.
Mike, I want you to take a listen to what his family had to say. And this gets into the world of motive and what was going on in his life and how this retirement was going to potentially impact him.
My brother had stated to me that he was retiring and moving up, and he had cut his son off from any money, anything. He was tired of keeping him up. And Lisa was fixing to move in the family home, and Lisa was fixing to cut him off when come Christmas when he was supposed to come in. But he came in for Thanksgiving.
It was just me and Dad. We were out on the porch, and he said that Lisa hadn't told you, Michael, and that you could feel like that was what was causing the little bit of tension inside the house.
Mike, could it be that simple, that the solution to your problem, you don't want to get a job, you can't work, you want to, I don't know, stay at home, play video games, whatever it is, and they cut off the money, and now you're going to cut off their body parts?
You know, Vinnie, I have to obviously lean toward people like Siobhan to really understand what's going on in the psyche of these individuals. And as crazy as all this sounds, it still is very clear when we look at the behavior of this predator in this event that there was pre-planning. And I think we're going to probably talk about that in a moment, but there were indications that he was fantasizing about this and that he was preparing. We know from the sister's testimony, and I remember her talking on the stand and how traumatic that was, that he had been cut off from the family money, that mom and dad were going to retire. They needed to now save their money for their retirement, and they weren't going to be a money train for this kid any longer. And all of a sudden, we start seeing him go through a process of fantasizing and then preparing. And preparing is an understatement when we look at the evidence that came out in this particular case and the things that he did. And I think we're going to jump into that in a minute, so I'm going to pause right there, but to say that it was really clear that whether he's crazy or not, he was making conscious decisions. He was doing it secretly. He was doing it clandestinely, and he was doing it knowing what society's standards are, and yet he was choosing to go right against those anyway.
And you're exactly right, Mike. We're going to take a look at more of those details that were uncovered and ask the question, is recovery possible for Joel Guy Jr.?
To all law enforcement and the lawyers, the court, the jury, everyone that had to see all this. And I'm very sorry that this evil's had to come into their life too. And that I will be praying for all of them as I do for my family as well.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV.
I did not want him dead.
A renowned snake breeder is shot and killed at his breeding facility.
If the devil was a person, I believe that was her.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rollins. All new Sunday night, 8/7 Central.
Only on Court TV.
When we entered the home, there were multiple rooms in the home that seemed to be involved as part of the crime scene. There were many chemicals that were scattered in different areas throughout the home. There were many blood spots in different areas throughout the home, and there were also multiple dismembered body parts in various rooms throughout the home.
That's the medical examiner, Dr. Amy Haar, responding to the scene. This is an ME who just didn't sit back and wait for the bodies to come in to do an autopsy. She was there. Also there were officers. Lisa Guy didn't show up to work. She was a very responsible person. They were concerned at work. They called law enforcement. They went for a wellness check. And I don't think those officers had any idea what they were about to encounter. Let's take a look.
Knox County Sheriff's Office! Police! Police Department, Sheriff's Office! Knox County Sheriff's Office! got one, probably one down here too, Jay. I'm going right, Benji. Here, get out. Clear. This door shuts where dog is. Knives. Blood. Is that people's hands? Yeah, I think so. That's what I see. That's what it looks like. Hands.
I'll never get those smells out of my head or my dreams.
There you heard from one of those officers who responded. Never gonna be able to forget that. You know, will they be able to recover from that? Yeah, they'll go back out and do their jobs, but they're never gonna forget it. It was a disturbing scene. That puts it mildly. And the person responsible is Joel Guy Jr., which brings me to my next question. Someone who is capable of that, is recovery possible for Joel Guy Jr.? Could he come back to, I guess, reality and some sense of normalcy? Is that even possible? Still with us, Mike King and Siobhan Scott. Siobhan, what are your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting question. And again, it gets back into what were the reasons that he did this. If he did it because he was on meth, can a person get help with meth and get off drugs and clean up their life and their mind and maybe have some hope? But that wasn't the case here. Did he do it because he had been abused? There's been absolutely no evidence to indicate that the parents ever treated him poorly or that there was ever any abuse. And he clearly did not have a psychotic disorder or a mental illness that would improve with medication. So what we're left with is this is just a person who developed in a very aberrant way from the get-go. Does he have a psychopathic and narcissistic personality disorder? And that does not really change over time. It's not an illness that happens to you. It's who you are. It's how you developed from the beginning. And what we know about people who have a psychopathic brain is they actually have differences in the structure and function of their brain that reduce their capacity to have empathy for people and to have compassion and to attach in normal, healthy ways. They just don't do that. And that's not a skill that can be taught. So can he ever be someone that you would feel like can be safe out in the community with a good braking system, that he can monitor himself and be trusted? I don't think so. I don't think I see that hope. Maybe he can find a good niche in prison that works well for him, but I don't see him out among the rest of us.
Mike, I want to play some of the testimony related to those details that show exactly the planning in all of this. Let's watch.
Get killing knives, quick, multiple. Get
Is that
carving.
quick, or is that
quick?
Q-U-I? Is that a C or is it an E?
Quiet, yes, it could be, yes. I'm sorry. It appears to be an ET, yes. Multiple. Get carving knives to make small pieces. Get sledgehammer, crush bones. Bring blender and food grinder, grind meat.
Keep going.
Get bleach, denature proteins. Get plastic bin for denaturation process.
Keep going.
Does not matter where they're killed. Just get rid of bloody spots to prevent evidence of time of death, not the mattress or the couches. Get rid of bodies inside house, there and my DNA already there. And then there's a part that's scratched out. Open up doggy door to provide entryway. Flush chunks down toilet, not garbage disposal. Get plastic sheeting for disposal process. And then the part that's crossed out, get hollow point bullets just in case. Will be seen buying bullets, just use computer room gun. Check to make sure there are bullets, last resort. He's not alive to claim her half of the insurance, money, and then an arrow, all mine, $500,000. Flood the house, covers forensic evidence. Turn heater up as high as it goes, speeds decomposition. Bleach reacts with luminol, just like blood, douse area with bleach. Big sprayer, lye, trash compactor, Body gives time of death and an arrow alibi. Don't have to get rid of body if there is no forensic evidence on the body. His fingerprints and DNA.
Absolutely chilling, Mike.
Yeah, Vinny. I mean, as you listen to this, it really is disturbing. But what it does is it also helps us understand how these predators go through a process of being organized at first. And in his mind, even as wacky as all of this sounds, it's making perfect sense to him. He's set up how he's going to go through this process, the ways in which he's going to dispose of the body parts, the way in which he's going to dispose of all of the physical evidence, including eventually, once he's away from the scene because of the way he was trying to rig things to have that home erupt into flames and burn to the ground. And we see all of this, but what he can't plan for, and what we see so often in these kinds of cases, is we see this organized thought process become disorganized. And we don't see it happen in the opposite when we look at these predacious kinds of crimes where somebody is disorganized and they suddenly put it together. But we do see where they are organized, they have a plan, they have a process, they're putting it all together. But once this thing starts coming together, they realize this person's fighting harder than I thought they would. My mother's fighting harder than I thought she would. And all of a sudden, the plan starts to disintegrate. They get cuts on their hands. They get wounds that we see in that Walmart imagery. And we see them all of a sudden falling apart and trying to pick up the pieces and then get out of Dodge as quick as they can, even though he waits a day and a half before he tries to leave and head out of town. All along, he's trying to keep what he thinks is an organized thought process together, but he's obviously unraveling at the seams. And thankfully, those are the kinds of things that make prosecutors like you able to put cases together.
Siobhan, what are your thoughts about that list that he made?
Yeah, in his mind, he had a great plan, and he left a big, horrible, bloody mess. I have a very hard time, again, going back to how anyone could do that to anyone, but particularly to your mother and father. It just shows that you're dealing with someone who thinks very differently than the rest of us do. They go through the world looking at what can I get out of it, and if there's something in my way, what can I do to get what I want, which in this case was the estate and all the money.
That was clear. Mike, we have about 30 seconds here, that he thought he was going to get all the money after this was all over.
Yeah, right back to where we started. Is he doing this because he's crazy, or is he got a psychotic personality, or is a psychopath? It doesn't matter. What he was planning on doing is he lost his money train, and he was planning on getting it back, and it was going to be at the expense of murdering his mother and father. And he didn't just do it and get it over with. He stabbed them up to 70-some times between the two of them, Vinny. Wow. That's a whole bunch of premeditation.
Mike King and Siobhan Scott, thank you so much for helping us through this extremely gruesome and difficult case. We appreciate your expertise and your time. You know, stories of psychopathic killers who commit unspeakable crimes garner a lot of attention. First, because we can't believe what happened, but also because we want to know why it happened. I think that's because we all want to believe we can prevent the next psychopath from committing atrocious violence and preying on innocent victims. Let's just hope the more we know, the more it helps identify the next potential killer. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.